Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. This is the truth about the tragic murder of photojournalist James Foley. Let me start by saying in no way is this video meant to detract from the loss of life, Jim's memory, and the obvious pain, suffering, and grieving that his immediate family and friends must be going through at this given point of time. But as a journalist, and Jim was also a journalist, it's not my job to make you feel good. My social obligation is to the truth, and it's exactly what this video is about. So pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because what might sound very controversial at first is in reality the real and absolute truth. Yesterday, America, largely those of you tuning around the world, were stunned and shocked to see the beheading of Jim. Jim forced on his knees by radical Islamist terrorist organization ISIS, otherwise known as ISIL, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, forcing Jim on his knees and to utter and make the statement that America was his real killer. Before the man, who had a British accent, from what people have interpreted thus far, dressed head to toe in black, proceeded to behead Jim live on camera. And this was blasted all across the social media yesterday. A gruesome and a heinous act, an international war crime. And I don't even think that's debatable. It is an absolute gross account and gross act committed by this group. But Jim, forced to make the statement that America was his real killer, in actuality is the truth. And before you turn off this video and run the other direction or put your head in the sand like the ostrich that most Americans are, hear me out and let me explain myself. You see, ISIS didn't even exist when Jim was first captured in Syria in 2012. It was a figment of the Obama imagination at that point in time. Now, keep in mind, Obama, who's bypassed Congress twice now, and arguably with other measures, has attacked two independent sovereign countries in recent years. First with Libya and his indirect support for the murder and assassination of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, and what became later known as Benghazi Gate, the scandal where CIA agents, people like Christopher Stevens and other Americans who were tragically killed, were funneling and transferring weapons of war, guns, to Syrian insurgents on the ground. That became known what is Benghazi Gate today. You know what Hillary Clinton, dressed in green not too long ago, wearing her big bold glasses, said? What difference does it make? That scandal? Well, all of that propelled through the direct geopolitical actions of the President of the United States, taking those guns and arming the insurgents on the ground in Syria. Now, also around that time, the Obama administration and the statist mainstream media here in the United States, working together, also made a bold accusation against Syrian leader and the leader of the Syrian government, Bashar al-Assad, accusing him of the deadly sarin gas, the chemical attack that killed men, women, and children, which they called an international war crime. Now, that very serious accusation at the time later was investigated by people like Carla Del Ponte of the UN, the United Nations, and also other independent investigators. And actually, instead of pointing the finger at the Bashar al-Assad government, which was the accusation of Obama in the mainstream media here in the States, actually pointed the finger in the opposite direction at the insurgents on the ground that Obama has directly and indirectly supporting, not just with weapons, but funding in Syria. And you see, those same insurgents, those same terrorists that are being and have been actively supported by the United States government. Again, this is what the scandal was of Benghazi Gate, if you didn't know, and the guns transferring to these parts of the world has grown and catalyzed the movement and the arguably more deadly and violent terrorist organization, worse than Al-Qaeda, that has become ISIS today. Obama and your government has actually allowed it to happen. And you see, that's what Americans fail to realize, because they don't understand the historical context. They don't follow every detail. All they see, and their emotions are pulled, the heartstrings are pulled, all they see is the tragic event that they witnessed yesterday. And it's exactly why the Obama administration is cherry-picking this specific event and using it as propaganda to build support for the illegal war in Iraq. Because they know it's very difficult for an American to argue against bombing Iraq when people are getting their heads chopped off. It's just the truth. And so they're using it to build a narrative, again, around this illegal war. You know, folks, it's said, and it has been said, it's kind of goes without saying, that you're supposed to judge a man, anybody for that matter, not based on what they say, not what comes from out of their mouth, but actually by their actions, what they actually do in reality. And the president in 2008, when he was campaigning to become president, sold and pitched two ideas to the American public at the time. Number one was hope and change, where he positioned himself as a great uniter, really a savior of sorts, and also that he would end the George W. war in Iraq, that he would end more specifically that war, that engagement in Iraq. Now, both of those things that he promised, he actually did the exact opposite of what he said he would do. We don't have hope and change in this country. All you have to do is take a look at Ferguson, Missouri today, and the racism and the hatred and the prejudice and the violence to see that we're arguably more racist, and there's actually more hate, arguably, in America today than before the president was elected. And he also did the exact opposite in Iraq, having bombed not just Libya, but also Iraq in very recent weeks. So he's done the exact opposite of what he said he would do. Also found it very interesting that within the past 24 hours, Mike Morrell, the former head of the CIA, Michael, said that the greatest threat now isn't just ISIS, it's Americans, you tuning in, the domestic terrorists, you with a thinking brain, a thinking cap, and critical assessment of what's happening around you. You're actually the greatest threat. And what Obama should be worried about, and what Mike Morrell, the former head of the CIA, is worried about, is Americans going overseas and using their passports to join terrorist organizations like ISIS and then coming back to the States to attack America. You see how they've now flipped that narrative around, and it's you that they fear? It's not even ISIS that is the worst enemy. It's you, the domestic terrorist, with an American passport. So they're building this narrative very creatively, but very strategically. Because again, it's easy to pull on the heartstrings and the emotions of the American people to cherry pick certain events to support Obama's war. Something he promised against in 2008. And again, that's not an opinion. That's not hearsay. It's the actual facts. It's what happened. Obama promised specifically to end the war in Iraq, and he's actually at war with Iraq. And post this heinous act yesterday and the tragic, vile, and violent death of Jim Foley, Obama has only promised to step up his efforts. You see how this all works, folks? You see how it's programming? You see how it's just really manipulation? Again, building the Obama war narrative. Just like President George W. Bush, just like the Patriot Act, how that had come to be and was already being put to paper before the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack even happened. Just like Al-Qaeda was positioned as the boogeyman at the time, as the reason George W. Bush was going to go invade and attack that country, what became known as Iraq. Now, Al-Qaeda has just switched positions, which is actually joining forces, according and allegedly, based on a couple of reports I read earlier, with ISIS, which is arguably more dangerous than Al-Qaeda even ever was. You see, they need a boogeyman and they need a problem in order to sell you on this war. And it's why the death of Jim Foley is utterly tragic. And it's why, although he was forced to make the statement that America was his real killer, was right. And is correct in that assessment. Because America is his real killer. And the federal government responsible. And the direct actions of the President of the United States are to blame. That's the truth. I'm Christopher Green. Get it out everywhere. Make it viral. Hard hitting it in your face. And click the link below to support our sponsor.